Good morning, everybody. My voice is a little hoarse today. Kind of getting through a little bit of a sickness. I think I'm gonna be all right. Wanted to do a little bit of talking today about grass, stockpiled forage, things like that, and how to really recognize whether or not stockpiled forage is still worth grazing, whether or not it's still any good. You know, I've got several videos talking about Bermuda forage, and then there's all kinds of videos online talking about other types of stockpiled forages and things like that. And a lot of those stockpile forages that are better at being stockpiled, those you can pretty much just graze until they're gone. Bermuda's not necessarily that way, but you can definitely graze it deeper into the winter time, and usually you can end up getting it grazed away. But I'm talking about forages like this that are not really traditionally used as stockpile forage. Of course, this was brush hogged just a little bit before, so there's a lot of dead grass laying on top of it. So that's dead and bad. But underneath that is still some decent bahia. It's okay. There's still a little bit of grazability in that. So when you look up underneath there, you can kind of see. And then we've got a couple different types of grasses. So we've got bahia in here. We've got all sorts of different mix in this pasture. We brush hogged it really, really high. And so there's a lot of weird looking spots, and like this right here, this is turned completely brown. We just got a frost, so how can you identify these different types of grasses? Some of them, once they turn brown, they're just not going to have any value at all, But what we're trying to find out when we walk into a pasture like this, is there any potential for grazing at all? If I turn them in here, am I going to have to give them some hay, or are they going to starve, or what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Because this is all brown matter. There's not a lot of Bermuda grass out here. Bermuda is going to be our best bet for stockpile, or if it's not Bermuda, then we're going to be wanting to go for some kind of a winter grass, something, a good winter forage that they can graze. I have seen in late winter, after the frost hit, we've got a little bit of blackberry leaves over there. In late winter, late fall, early winter, a lot of times the cattle can get a little good out of those blackberry leaves, but only after the frost, I've noticed. But that's not something you want to depend on at all by any means. So what are we really looking for here? How do we know when we turn them into a pasture like this, are they going to get any real value? Other things that you can look for is like this green right here. Things that have these are types of water grasses. They can get a little good in the wintertime out of certain types of water grasses that stay green. Like these right here. This one's not the best at all. If there was a whole bunch of this, they would get a little good out of this. You can tell it got clipped by the brush hog. That wasn't from grazing. But they would get a little good from that right there if there was a bunch of that, but there's not a whole lot of it. If there was a lot of ryegrass in here, you'd probably be okay, especially if you mixed it in with this brown matter. You'd really have some good forage for them. But when you turn them into a pasture like this, are you going to have to put in a bale of hay immediately, or can you watch them and let them go? Can you turn them loose in this? Well, a couple things you want to look for. Of course, you want to move all your brush hogged stuff. And that's one thing that brush hogging did. I want you to notice this. Brush hogging actually covered up. I brush hogged high, and it covered and protected my green matter, okay? Normally, this would all be brown and gone, okay? So that's kind of something I wanted to show y'all and talk about a little bit in this video, is that sometimes strategic late brush hogging, if it's a bahia pasture, you see that? It covers it up. The air starts to condense when it turns to dew, and then it turns to dew on top of this, and the dew is what causes the frost and then kills it, okay? It's the cold itself doesn't affect it as badly in the early times. Now as it goes on and it gets really, really deep cold, that deep cold will freeze the water that's in this blade, okay? But it's the actual dew that will cause it's like it will freeze burn it, okay? And that's what's really causing the initial death and turning of brown. So you can actually prolong a lot of that by brush hogging at a strategic time in certain bahia pastures, or pastures that you've got grasses that aren't the best for stockpiling, like crabgrass. Crabgrass is okay for early season stockpiling. Like I'm talking really early, like right now. Like we've got a couple different types of crabgrasses over in there. They're still good, and you know, and I'm gonna show you in a minute one way that you can kind of identify that they're really good. But this right here is something you can do, especially with this bahia. Bahia is one of the worst, okay, for stockpiling. But you can do this. You can brush hog over top of it and knock those weeds down. This had a lot of weed. That's mostly weed. So we had grazed it, and then we brush hogged it, and we used those weeds to our advantage, okay? We put those weeds over top of that. People are kind of starting to feed hay at this point, all right? And we've actually turned this grass right here is actually still green, okay? So I've got this right here, this little blanket laying over top of this, and this is gonna help me with a lot of these early frost. We're gonna get these light frost right now. For the next month or so, we'll probably get several light frost. And that's just kind of what we get throughout, but it's not really, really cold. It's just light frost, just light enough to do this right here, to turn it all brown, okay? But even in the places where there are no forage covering it, you can tell there's still a little bit of green matter in there. And that's what you want to look for. Does it have any bottoms that are still green down in there? You know, these bottoms would not be green. That's the second thing. If there wasn't the height to this grass would already be, you know, a lot of people's pastures, they'll either brush hog them down to nothing, or here, I will walk over here and I'm going to show you this. Now this just got brush hogged after the frost, so it's not going to be quite as good of an example as it could be. But this right here is the pipeline, and they came through afterwards and they brush hogged it down a lot lower than I did. So if you brush hog it down low like this, it looks significantly better, especially if you got a sharp brush hog. But if they would have brush hogged this and then it would have frosted, there would have been no covering, no blanket at all. So all of these tips, these green tips, wouldn't be here. The only reason these green tips are here is because they brush hogged afterwards, okay, and got it smoothed up after, okay? So that's completely exposed to the dew, and every bit of that would have completely died and turned brown. And you're right at the bottom of that anyway, and there's just not a whole lot of good left of that. So you turn a cow into that after the frost is in there, and there's nothing. There's zero good matter for them. You better just go ahead and spend the money and go get some more hay. Okay? So, but if you've got this, where you've got grass that's laying over top of other grass, some of it's brush hogged, some of it's just the tops of the grass has protected the bottoms of the grass, there's still 6 inches of good grass in there, okay? There's pretty decent grass, and there will be for another 3 weeks to maybe a month in there, okay? If I don't turn them loose in here. If I turn them loose in here, they're gonna graze it up, you know? But you can see there's still some decent matter. Now, I'm not talking about great, awesome forage. I'm not talking about them putting on 2 pounds a day with this forage. I'm just talking about forage that will keep you from having to feed a bale of hay, especially if your bale, you know, there's some people out there that have spent 60 bucks a bale or more. There are some people, I think in some places right now, have spent $80 a bale, and even more than that probably. I don't know for sure. So if you're talking about spending that much for hay, you're going to want to figure out how to not feed more of that hay than you can. Okay, we've kind of got a little bit of Bermuda, just a little patch in here, and it's all the way brown, but Bermuda will hold its protein for a little bit longer. So we're going to be okay with that. I know a guy lives right down the road from me. He actually did a test on stockpiled Bermuda himself, and he found that it did hold its protein, that all of my anecdotal test that I did, he actually found them to be accurate. He went and got tests done on that. So maybe one day I'll do some videos on that, some actual tests showing that. So now I want to talk about a couple other different ways that you can tell whether or not you've got grass worth grazing, other than looking down in there and finding good grass. And one way is just pluck your grass out. Pluck it out, whatever it is. You know, don't get if it's brush hog like this, don't get the brush hog clippings on top, because you know that's not going to be any good. So you want to rake any of those brush hog clippings out of the way. I'm trying to find some good stuff here. Let's see. I mean, it's all going to be relatively okay right now. But I just want to give you something that's going to be a good example. Let's walk over here to some of this different crabgrass in here. I believe that's what this is. What is this? All right. I'm going to pull some of this up. This stuff's solid brown, so it's got no green left to it at all. Okay? Like that. And then you want to smell it. And smell it and see if it smells like good hay. So I'm sure we all know what that good hay smell and the non-good hay smell. Now I know this is no serious, this is not like a special test. But that smells good. It's got a good smell to it. It doesn't have a mildewed smell. It doesn't have but not only that, it's still got that grassy smell to it, okay? That's the best thing I can tell you on that is, I know it's not a special test, but sometimes when you're out in the field, you got to do what you got to do. But I find that as long as it's still got that grassy smell to it, that nice, rich smell, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to a good bale of hay. Now, each grass, each different type of hay is going to smell just a little bit different. But go to a good bale of hay and reach inside, like reach down in deep into that bale, pull some out and smell it. Incidentally, that's what you should be doing if you're buying hay from somebody you don't know. You should be doing that with that hay anyway. Now, that's not telling you protein. That's not telling you everything, and I recognize that. But it will tell you how, if that grass is starting to decompose, that grass is starting to break down and all like that. If it's not decomposing or breaking down yet, then that means it's still got some value, okay? So that's one good test, is the smelling. Another really good test is raking it back and seeing if you've still got green to it. And then you can also just look at the color to it. You can tell that's still got a gold color to it. Of course, this is more prone to have that gold color to it. So you're not going to find that with the Bahia. It's going to start to turn brown very quickly. But as I said, with Bahia is not a great grass anyway. This one's not Bahia. This one's, I think it's crabgrass. It works a little bit better for sure. But with the Bahia, if it's still got green underneath, which it will have green underneath, if you'll leave some length to your grass and let it stay covered, and or clip any weeds that are on top and let all those clippings lay on top to protect it. If it's still got green down in there, a good bit of green, then that's still going to have a lot of good in there. And a lot of times that brown matter that's on that Bahia, if you can pluck it off, if you look at it, it can still have a light green tinge to it. Okay, that light green tinge instead of that dark, dirty brown. It's hard to, you're not going to pick it up on that camera, but if it's got that light green tinge, a lot of y'all guys that you deal with hay, you know what I'm talking about. If it's still got that light green tinge, a lot of times that's still good hay. And if I smell it, it still smells good. It's got a good grassy smell to it. So anyway, those are just some good things to look out for if you're not really sure what to look for, whether or not they're going to need any hay. But the main thing is knowing how to protect this Bahia for as long as possible. I've been able, so far every year, I've been able to keep my cows from feeding hay for longer and longer. Last year I got beyond January and almost into February. I don't know if I'll do that every year consistently, but we'll see. So anyway guys, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.